My name is Viola Winters, and at 68 years old, I never expected betrayal would come wrapped as a Mother's Day gift. When my daughter-in-law Jessica left me stranded at that deserted train station, she claimed it was to test if I was truly losing my mind. The fear in my bones that night was nothing compared to the chill I felt a week later when she returned with power of attorney papers in hand. But I wish you could have seen her face when she realized who was standing right beside me. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever had someone try to make you doubt your own mind, hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of justice. Served ice cold. Thomas had always been my pride and joy. Since the day he was born with those curious blue eyes just like his father's, I knew he was special. As a single child, we shared a bond that went beyond the typical mother and son relationship. When he got accepted to MIT for computer engineering, I cried harder than he did. Those phone calls every Sunday became my lifeline while he was away building his future. He met Jessica during his final year of university. She was studying finance, and according to Thomas, she was brilliant. The first time I met her was during spring break when Thomas brought her home to Maine. She was undeniably beautiful with her perfect posture, immaculate blonde hair, and designer clothes that seemed out of place in our small coastal town. I remember thinking she seemed a bit stiff, a little too polished, but she was polite, and Thomas was clearly smitten. "Mom, she's amazing," he told me while Jessica was freshening up for dinner. "She's already got job offers from 3 different investment firms in Boston." I smiled and hugged him. "If she makes you happy, then I'm happy." And I meant it. Any mother wants their child to find someone who brings them joy. Their wedding 5 years ago was elegant but cold, much like Jessica herself. She had taken control of every detail from the precisely arranged white roses to the exact timing of the speeches. My suggestion for including Thomas's late father's favorite song during the ceremony was politely but firmly dismissed. "We're going for a more contemporary feel," Jessica explained with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. By then, Thomas had secured a position as a software engineer at a prestigious tech company. His career was taking off, and Jessica made sure everyone at the wedding knew about it. "Thomas just closed a deal worth 7 figures," she announced to my brother and his wife during the reception. Thomas looked uncomfortable but didn't correct her. After the wedding, they bought a beautiful Victorian house in a suburb just outside Boston. Jessica took a position at an investment firm, and from the outside, they seemed to be living the perfect life. I remained in our family home in Maine, still teaching 4th grade at the same elementary school where I'd worked for 30 years. Robert, my husband of 40 years, passed away from a sudden heart attack 2 years after their wedding. The loss left me adrift. After 4 decades of partnership, the silence in our home was deafening. Thomas was wonderful during that time, calling daily and visiting as often as he could. Jessica came along less frequently, always claiming work commitments. "Mom, why don't you consider moving closer to us?" Thomas suggested 6 months after Robert's funeral. "There's a nice senior community just 15 minutes from our house." I balked at the word senior, but the idea of being closer to my son had appeal. After much consideration, I sold our family home, retired from teaching, and moved to a small but charming cottage, about 20 minutes from Thomas and Jessica's house. That's when things began to change subtly. The first incident happened during a Sunday dinner at their house. I brought dessert and apple pie made from Robert's mother's recipe. "Didn't you bring apple pie last time?" Jessica asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "No, I brought chocolate cake for Thomas's birthday," I replied confidently. Jessica exchanged a look with Thomas. "That was 3 months ago, Viola. You brought apple pie just 2 weeks ago." I started to argue, but then hesitated. Had I, with Robert gone, sometimes days blurred together. Thomas looked concerned, and I let it drop, not wanting to create tension. A week later, I couldn't find my car keys. I searched my cottage for over an hour before Jessica came by unexpectedly. "Losing things, Viola?" she asked, watching me frantically search through drawers. "Just my car keys. I know they're here somewhere." Jessica found them in the refrigerator of all places. "This isn't like you," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "Maybe you should mention it to your doctor." I laughed it off. Just a senior moment. But I knew I hadn't put those keys in the refrigerator. It made no sense. Similar incidents followed. Appointments I was certain I hadn't made appeared on my calendar. Items in my home would be rearranged. And when I mentioned it, Jessica would say, "You asked me to organize that shelf last week, don't you remember?" But I didn't remember, and that scared me. Thomas began to show more concern. "Mom, Jessica mentioned you forgot about your dentist appointment yesterday." "What appointment? I didn't have one scheduled." Thomas pulled out his phone and showed me a text I'd supposedly sent him confirming the appointment, but I never sent it. At least I didn't think I had. Confusion and self-doubt began to take root. Was I really becoming forgetful? At 68, I knew cognitive decline was possible, but this felt different, wrong somehow. Then came the suggestion about my finances. Jessica stopped by one afternoon with some paperwork. "Thomas and I were thinking it might be helpful if we assisted you with managing your accounts," she said casually. "Just to make sure everything's in order." I stiffened. "My finances are fine, Jessica. I managed our family budget for 40 years. "Of course," she said soothingly. "But that was when Robert was alive. And things are more complicated now with retirement funds and Medicare." When I spoke to Thomas about it later, he seemed uncomfortable but supportive of Jessica's suggestion. "She deals with finances all day, Mom. She just wants to help." But I didn't want her help. I didn't need it. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted. What if I was declining? What if I couldn't trust my own memory? As weeks passed, I noticed I was seeing less of my new neighbors. Invitations to community events seemed to decrease. When I mentioned this to Thomas, he looked surprised. Jessica said, "You've been declining invitations because you've been tired lately." I never declined any invitations. In fact, I hadn't received any. Something wasn't right, but who would believe me over Jessica? Especially when I was beginning to doubt myself. By the time autumn arrived, Jessica had taken over planning all family gatherings. My suggestions were politely acknowledged, then ignored. When my birthday came around, I mentioned I'd love a small dinner with Thomas and a few neighbors I'd grown close to. Instead, Jessica organized an elaborate lunch at an expensive restaurant with people I barely knew, mostly her colleagues and their spouses. Thomas seemed to think this was what I wanted. "Jessica said you mentioned wanting to expand your social circle," he explained when I questioned him. But I never said that. The distance between what I knew to be true and what Jessica reported was growing wider by the day. I tried to maintain my independence despite feeling increasingly uncertain. I joined a book club at the local library, started taking morning walks, and volunteered at an animal shelter once a week. These small acts of self-determination became my anchors. One day, I returned from my volunteer shift to find Jessica in my cottage. She had a key for emergencies, but this wasn't one. "I thought I'd help organize your medication," she said cheerfully, standing in my kitchen with my prescription bottles spread across the counter. "Your system seemed confusing." My system wasn't confusing at all. I used a weekly pill organizer that had worked perfectly for years. "I've set up this new chart," she continued, showing me a complicated spreadsheet. "Thomas and I were worried you might not be taking the right doses." After she left, I noticed my carefully arranged pill organizer had been completely rearranged. The medications didn't look right, but I couldn't prove anything had been changed. Around this time, Thomas began working longer hours and traveling more frequently for business. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When I called, Jessica often answered, explaining that Thomas was too busy to talk but would call back later. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. My neighbor Eleanor became my confidant during this period. A retired nurse in her 70s, she had a no-nonsense attitude that I found comforting. "Something doesn't add up with your daughter-in-law," she said one afternoon, over tea in my kitchen. "These memory issues seem to only happen when she's involved." I had noticed the same pattern but was afraid to voice it. What if I was wrong? What if I really was losing my grip on reality? Jessica's comments about my mental state became more frequent and less subtle. "Did you forget to turn off the stove again?" she would ask when Thomas was within earshot, though I knew I hadn't left it on. Or remember, we talked about this yesterday regarding conversations we never had. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when I couldn't find my wedding ring. I always kept it in a small dish on my bedside table, but one morning it was simply gone. I tore the house apart, looking for it, frantic to find this last physical connection to Robert. When Jessica stopped by unexpectedly that afternoon, I was still searching. "Missing something?" she asked. "My wedding ring," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I always keep it on my nightstand, but it's gone." Jessica sighed and pulled out a small notebook from her purse. "This is the third valuable item you've misplaced this month, Viola." She showed me a list of items with dates next to them. According to her notes, I'd also lost a silver bracelet and a pair of pearl earrings, though I had no recollection of this. "We found your bracelet in the freezer," she reminded me. "And the earrings were in your gardening supplies." I had no memory of losing those items, or where they'd been found. A cold fear settled in my stomach. The ring mysteriously reappeared 3 days later inside a potted plant on my porch. I never put it there. I couldn't have. These incidents multiplied, and Jessica meticulously documented each one in her notebook. When Thomas expressed concern about my well-being, Jessica suggested I see a doctor. "Just to rule out anything serious," she said with practiced concern. The appointments were humiliating. Jessica insisted on accompanying me, speaking over me whenever the doctor asked questions. "She's been getting worse," Jessica would say. "Last week, she left the front door wide open when she went to bed, and she's been forgetting to eat." I tried to defend myself, to explain that these things weren't happening the way Jessica described them, but my protests sounded like denial even to my own ears. The doctor ran tests, found nothing conclusive, but noted mild cognitive concerns in my chart, based largely on Jessica's reports. After one such appointment, I tried to talk to Thomas alone. "I'm not as confused as Jessica makes it seem," I told him, when we had a rare moment without her. He took my hand, his eyes full of worry. "Mom, we're just concerned. Jessica notices things when she visits you that I don't see. She's trying to help." "But some of these things she claims they never happened," I insisted. Thomas looked pained. "Memory issues often involve denial, Mom. The doctor said that's common." I realized then that I was fighting a losing battle. Jessica had positioned herself as the concerned, helpful daughter-in-law, while I was being cast as the declining, confused elder in denial about my condition. When I tried to confront Jessica privately about my suspicions, she looked at me with perfectly feigned shock. "Viola, why would I make up such things? What would I possibly have to gain?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm just trying to take care of you like family should." The performance was flawless. If I pushed back, I would only appear more paranoid and confused. As winter settled in, Jessica began talking to Thomas about safety concerns regarding my living alone. I overheard them discussing options for more supervised living arrangements when they thought I was napping during a visit to their home. My world was shrinking, my autonomy slipping away, and I felt powerless to stop it. But a small, stubborn part of me refused to believe I was losing my mind. Something wasn't right, and somehow I needed to prove it. Spring arrived, bringing with it warming temperatures and Mother's Day. I'd been dreading the holiday without Robert, who always made the day special with breakfast in bed and fresh flowers from our garden. 3 days before Mother's Day, Jessica called with an unexpected proposal. "I want to do something special for you," she said, her voice unusually warm. A Mother's Day surprise, just the two of us. I was instantly suspicious, but tried to mask it. "That sounds lovely. What did you have in mind?" "It's a surprise, but pack for a day trip. Comfortable shoes, light jacket. I'll pick you up Sunday morning at 9. When I asked if Thomas would join us, Jessica sighed. "Unfortunately, he has an emergency meeting with clients from Japan. The time difference means Sunday is the only option. He feels terrible about missing Mother's Day." This didn't sound like Thomas, who had never missed a Mother's Day, but when I called him later, he confirmed the story. "I'm really sorry, Mom. This client is worth millions to the company. I can't say no. But Jessica has planned something special. I think it will help you two bond." Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. Jessica pulled up in her sleek silver BMW at precisely 9 o'clock. She was dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking younger and more approachable than usual. "Ready for your surprise?" she asked, smiling as she opened the passenger door for me. Despite my reservations, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was an olive branch, a chance to improve our relationship. "All ready," I replied, getting into the car. The drive took us north out of suburban Massachusetts and into the more rural areas of New Hampshire. Jessica was uncharacteristically chatty, asking about my teaching career and sharing stories about her own grandmother. "Where exactly are we going?" I finally asked after we'd been driving for nearly 2 hours. "Harkin Station," Jessica replied. "It's an historic train depot that's been renovated as a museum and cultural center. They have a special exhibition on education through the decades that I thought you'd enjoy given your teaching background." It sounded thoughtful, and I felt a twinge of guilt for my suspicions. Maybe I had misjudged her. We arrived at Harkin Station shortly before noon. It was a charming, restored Victorian building with a small museum gift shop and cafe. A few other visitors wandered the grounds, but it wasn't crowded. "I thought we could explore separately and then meet for late lunch," Jessica suggested. "The education exhibit is in the main building, and I want to check out the photography collection in the East Wing. Shall we meet at the cafe at 2 o'clock? I agreed, pleased to have some time to explore at my own pace. The education exhibit was indeed fascinating, with old-school desks, vintage textbooks, and photographs dating back to the one-room schoolhouses of the 19th century. Time slipped away as I examined each display, reminiscing about my own teaching career. At 1:45, I made my way to the station cafe. It was small but quaint, with only 5 tables. Jessica wasn't there yet, so I found a seat and waited. 2 o'clock came and went. By 2:30, I began to worry and asked the cafe attendant if she'd seen a tall blonde woman in jeans and a blue sweater. "No, ma'am, but we're closing at 3 today. Sunday hours." Concerned, I left the cafe and searched the main exhibition hall and East Wing. No sign of Jessica. I checked the restrooms, the gift shop, and even went outside to see if she was waiting by the car. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the BMW was gone. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Had she left without me? Surely there must be some explanation. I approached a staff member, a young man arranging brochures near the entrance. "Excuse me, I seem to have lost my daughter-in-law. We were supposed to meet for lunch, but I can't find her anywhere." "The museum closes at 3, he replied. "Not many visitors left. Did you try calling her?" I reached for my phone only to realize I'd left it charging at home, not expecting to need it on our day trip. "Could I use your phone? I don't have mine with me." He let me use the office phone, but when I dialed Jessica's number, it went straight to voicemail. I tried Thomas next with the same result. By 3:30, the staff was clearly anxious to close. "Last train back to Boston left at 2:45, the young man informed me. "Next one's not until tomorrow morning." "Is there a taxi service?" "A bus?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. He shook his head. "Not on Sundays. We're pretty remote here." As the last visitors departed and staff began locking up, the reality of my situation sank in. I was stranded at an isolated train station with no transportation, no phone, and no idea why Jessica had abandoned me. "I can call the sheriff," offered the young man, looking uncomfortable, "but it might take a while for someone to come out here on a Sunday." "Please," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to get home." He made the call, explaining that an elderly woman had been left behind by her family. The description stung, but my pride was the least of my concerns. "Deputy says he's handling an accident on the highway. Could be a couple hours before anyone can get here," the young man reported. "I've got to lock up and head out, but you can wait in the main hall. Frank, the night security guard, will be here at 6. He can help you when he arrives." The staff left one by one, each offering awkward apologies as they departed. By 5 o'clock, I was completely alone in the deserted station. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building and distant bird calls. As daylight began to fade, the temperature dropped. I huddled on a wooden bench in the main hall, my light jacket inadequate against the evening chill. Hunger gnawed at my stomach and fear clawed at my mind. Why would Jessica do this? The question circled endlessly. Then, like a lightning bolt, I remembered her words from months ago. Sometimes I wonder if you're really losing your mind, Viola. Was this a test? Had she abandoned me here to see if I could manage on my own, to prove I was incompetent? The thought was so cruel, so calculated, that I initially rejected it. But as hours passed in that cold, empty station, doubt crept in. What if I had misunderstood our meeting arrangements? What if my memory really was failing? By the time darkness had fully settled, I was shivering from both cold and fear. The old station took on an ominous quality in the shadows, every noise amplified by my anxiety. When the security guard Frank finally arrived at 6, I was nearly in tears from relief. He was an elderly man himself, perhaps in his 70s, with kind eyes, and a concerned expression when he found me. "Good Lord, what are you doing here all alone?" he asked immediately, offering me his thermos of coffee. Through chattering teeth, I explained my situation. Frank's face darkened as he listened. "That don't sound right," he said firmly. "No one forgets their mother-in-law at a closed station. You said the car was gone." I nodded, grateful for his validation. "I've got a landline in my office. Let's call your son." Thomas didn't answer his phone, but Frank left a detailed message explaining where I was and that I needed immediate assistance. He then insisted I join him in his small security office where a space heater provided blessed warmth. "My shift goes till morning," Frank said, unwrapping a sandwich and offering me half. "You can stay right here where it's warm. But if your son don't call back within the hour, I'm calling my daughter to come get you. You can stay at our place tonight." The simple kindness broke something in me, and I began to cry. Frank patently waited out my tears, then said something I'll never forget. "My wife had dementia before she passed. Real dementia. Not the kind someone tries to convince you that you have. There's a difference." I looked up, startled by his perception. "I've seen the real thing," he continued. "And I've also seen folks try to make someone think they're losing it when they ain't. It's called gaslighting, and it's a terrible thing to do to a person." It was the first time anyone had suggested that what I was experiencing might not be my failing mind, but something deliberately done to me. The validation was like oxygen to a drowning person. Thomas finally called back around 8 o'clock, frantic with worry. Frank explained the situation again, giving precise directions to the station. Then he handed me the phone. "Mom, are you okay?" "What happened?" Thomas sounded genuinely concerned. "Jessica left me here," I said simply. "We were supposed to meet for lunch, but she disappeared. The car was gone." "That can't be right," Thomas replied, his voice strained. "Jessica said you wandered off while she was in the restroom. She looked everywhere for you, then drove around the surrounding area for hours trying to find you. She's been beside herself with worry." The lie was so bold, so complete, that for a moment I couldn't respond. "Mom, are you there?" "Yes," I finally managed. "That's not what happened, Thomas. She suggested we explore separately and meet at the cafe at 2. She never showed up." There was a long pause. "We'll sort this out when I get there. I'm leaving now. It'll take me about 2 hours." After we hung up, Frank looked at me with understanding. "Your daughter-in-law told a different story, didn't she?" I nodded, the reality of what I was facing settling heavily on my shoulders. "My advice," Frank said. "Get yourself one of them little tape recorders. Document everything. Because this doesn't sound like it's going to stop on its own." Thomas arrived at the station just after 10 o'clock that night. His face was drawn with worry and confusion as he hugged me tightly. "Thank God you're safe," he murmured into my hair. "I've been so worried." Frank had stayed with me the entire time, and I introduced them gratefully. "Frank has been my guardian angel tonight." Thomas thanked him profusely, trying to offer money, which Frank firmly refused. "Just take care of your mama," the older man said, giving me a knowing look as we left. The drive home was tense. Thomas explained that Jessica was waiting at my cottage, having apparently been searching for me all day. "She said you seemed confused about the meeting place," Thomas began carefully. That you wandered off while she was using the restroom, and she spent hours looking for you. That's not true, I said firmly. She suggested we explore separately and meet at the cafe at 2. When I arrived, she was nowhere to be found. The car was gone from the parking lot. Thomas gripped the steering wheel tighter. Mom, Jessica said your memory issues have been getting worse. She's worried about you wandering off. I did not wander off, I insisted, frustration building. Thomas, think about this logically. If I had wandered off, and Jessica spent hours searching for me, why didn't she alert the museum staff? Why didn't she call you immediately? Why didn't she contact local authorities? His brow furrowed as he considered this. I don't know. I'll ask her. Jessica was waiting on my porch when we arrived, rushing forward with an Oscar-worthy performance of relief and concern. Viola, she cried, embracing me stiffly. I was so worried. What happened to you? I pulled away from her, unable to maintain the pretense. You know exactly what happened. You left me there. Jessica's face transformed instantly into a mask of pity and concern. She turned to Thomas. See what I mean? She's confused and now she's paranoid. This is exactly what I was worried about. I am not confused, I stated firmly. You suggested we meet at the cafe at 2. You never showed up. Jessica shook her head sadly. Viola, we were together the whole time until you said you needed to use the restroom. When you didn't come back after 20 minutes, I started searching for you. I looked everywhere. Then why was your car gone from the parking lot? I demanded. I drove around the surrounding area looking for you, she replied smoothly. I thought maybe you'd wandered down the road. I was frantic. Thomas stood between us, clearly torn. Let's all get some rest, he suggested. It's been a stressful day. Mom, why don't you stay with us tonight? I'd feel better knowing you're not alone. I wanted to refuse to retreat to my own space, but exhaustion overwhelmed me. I nodded reluctantly. That night in their guest room, I lay awake, replaying the day's events. I knew what had happened. Jessica had deliberately abandoned me to make me appear incompetent, confused, unable to care for myself. But how could I prove it? The next morning, Jessica was all solicitous care, preparing breakfast, and speaking to me in the slow, loud tone one might use with a child or someone very impaired. Did you sleep well, Viola? She asked, placing a plate of toast before me. I've called Dr. Lambert. He can see you this afternoon for a follow-up. Yesterday's episode was very concerning. I don't need to see Dr. Lambert, I replied. There was no episode. You left me at that station on purpose. Jessica's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. When Thomas stepped out of the room to take a work call, she leaned close to me. Who do you think he'll believe? She whispered. His loving wife who takes care of everything, or his increasingly senile mother who can't even remember where she was supposed to meet for lunch. The naked malice in her voice confirmed everything. This wasn't my imagination or failing memory. This was deliberate cruelty. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice, barely audible. Jessica's smile was chilling. Let's just say retirement funds don't go as far as they used to. Thomas and I need to ensure your assets are properly managed. Before I could respond, Thomas returned, and Jessica's mask of concern slipped seamlessly back into place. I spent 3 uncomfortable days at their house, during which Jessica rarely left me alone with Thomas. She monitored my every move, helpfully pointing out to Thomas whenever I misplaced something or forgot a minor detail, amplifying normal human errors into evidence of serious decline. I overheard her on the phone one evening, speaking in hushed tones about elder care facilities and their costs. When she noticed me listening, she smoothly transitioned to discussing restaurant reservations, but the message was clear. She was making arrangements for my future without my consent. Thomas suggested I move in with them permanently, his face etched with worry. After what happened Sunday, I don't think you should be living alone, Mom. I'm perfectly capable of living independently, I insisted. What happened Sunday was not my fault or my confusion. Jessica abandoned me there. Thomas sighed heavily. Mom, please don't accuse Jessica like that. She's been nothing but supportive. Has she told you about her plans to put me in a nursing home? I asked bluntly. Thomas looked startled. What? No one's talking about nursing homes. We just want you safe. Ask her, I challenged. Ask her about the phone calls she's been making. Thomas did ask her later that evening when they thought I was asleep. I stood in the hallway listening to Jessica's expert manipulation. I was just researching options, she explained, her voice breaking artfully. After the incident at the train station, I'm terrified something worse could happen. What if she wanders off and we can't find her next time? What if she leaves the stove on and there's a fire? She's never done anything like that, Thomas protested, but his voice lacked conviction. That we know of, Jessica countered. She lives alone. How would we know if she's having episodes when we're not there? The doctor said her condition could deteriorate rapidly. I returned to the guest room, shaking with anger and fear. Jessica was systematically destroying my son's trust in me, isolating me, and positioning herself to take control of my life and assets. After 4 days, I insisted on returning to my cottage despite Thomas's objections. I needed space to think, to plan. Jessica drove me home, using the opportunity to further her narrative. Thomas is really worried about you, she said as we pulled up to my cottage. He's afraid you might hurt yourself by accident. We both think it would be best if you considered more supervised living arrangements. I'm not moving to a nursing home, I stated firmly. Jessica's smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, we can discuss other options. A neurological evaluation might help clarify what level of care you need. The evaluation took place the following week. Jessica insisted on being present, answering questions for me, and emphasizing my confusion and paranoia. The neurologist found nothing seriously wrong, noting only mild cognitive decline consistent with normal aging. But Jessica managed to make it sound much worse when reporting to Thomas. Dr. Feldman said she's showing clear signs of cognitive impairment, she told him on the phone while I sat across from her. He's recommended we consider guardianship options, while she can still participate in the decision. The doctor had said no such thing. When I tried to correct her, Jessica covered the phone and whispered, "He won't believe you." The worst part was, she was right. Thomas was increasingly viewing me through the lens Jessica had created, seeing confusion where there was clarity, risk where there was safety. My word against hers carried less weight with each passing day. My desperation grew as I felt control of my life slipping away. One afternoon, when I knew Jessica was at work and Thomas was traveling for business, I called my neighbor Eleanor. "I need your help," I said, fighting back tears. "Something terrible is happening and no one believes me." Eleanor came over immediately, and I told her everything from the earliest incidents to the Mother's Day abandonment. To my immense relief, she didn't look doubtful or concerned about my mental state. She looked angry. "This is elder abuse," she said firmly. "Financial exploitation and psychological abuse. I've seen it before when I was nursing." "What can I do?" I asked. "Thomas believes her over me. I have no proof." Eleanor thought for a moment. "You need evidence, and you need legal help before she manages to get control of your finances or worse, guardianship." Guardianship. The word sent chills down my spine. It's when the court grants someone legal authority to make decisions for a person deemed incapable, Eleanor explained. Medical decisions, financial decisions, where you live, everything. The thought of Jessica having that kind of control over my life was terrifying. I had to do something, and fast. 3 days later, Jessica called to arrange what she termed a family meeting at my cottage. "Thomas and I want to discuss some important options for your future care," she explained. "We'll come by on Saturday at 10. The tone of her voice made it clear this wasn't a discussion but a declaration. My time was running out. With Eleanor's help, I contacted her friend Marjorie, a retired attorney who specialized in elder law. Marjorie agreed to meet with me the next day. "Based on what you've described," Marjorie said after hearing my story, "your daughter-in-law appears to be engaging in a systematic campaign to establish guardianship over you and gain control of your assets. The technical term for what she's doing is gaslighting, making you question your own reality." "Can she really get guardianship that easily?" I asked. "Not easily, no," Marjorie reassured me. "But if she continues to isolate you, document alleged incidents, and convince healthcare providers and your son that you're incompetent, she could eventually petition the court. That's why we need to act now." Marjorie helped me understand my legal options and the importance of gathering evidence. First step, she advised, is documenting everything. Get a small recording device or use your phone to record interactions with her. Check if it's legal in your state, but even if you can't use recordings in court, they'll help you keep track of what's really happening. Eleanor bought me a small digital recorder that could fit in my pocket. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, she explained. But keep it for your own sanity, to remind yourself you're not crazy when she tries to twist things. With Marjorie's guidance, I also began researching Jessica's background. What we discovered was disturbing. Before meeting Thomas, Jessica had been briefly married to another wealthy professional, a surgeon named Alan Whitaker. Their marriage had ended abruptly after less than 2 years. While there were no public records detailing the divorce, Marjorie managed to contact Alan's sister through professional connections. She claimed he was mentally unstable, the sister reported. Tried to get power of attorney while he was going through a difficult time after their father died. When he refused, suddenly all these incidents started happening. Missing items, appointments he supposedly made but didn't remember. Sound familiar? It was eerily familiar. Jessica had done this before. Further digging revealed financial problems Jessica had carefully concealed. Despite her high-paying position, she had significant debt and a history of lavish spending beyond her means. Thomas, with his successful career and family inheritance, represented financial security. And now it seemed, so did I. Armed with this knowledge and Marjorie's advice, I prepared for Saturday's family meeting. I made copies of all my financial documents, wrote detailed accounts of Jessica's manipulation, and most importantly, formed a plan. Saturday morning arrived clear and bright, a stark contrast to the dark confrontation looming. I placed the small recorder in my cardigan pocket and waited. Thomas and Jessica arrived precisely at 10. Jessica carried a leather portfolio, her professional look firmly in place. Thomas looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as they sat down at my kitchen table. Viola, Jessica began her voice, gentle but firm. Thomas and I have been very concerned since the incident at Harkin Station. We've consulted with Dr. Lambert and other specialists, and we all agree that you need more support than you currently have. What kind of support? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Jessica exchanged a glance with Thomas before continuing. We believe it would be in your best interest if we established a power of attorney arrangement. This would allow us to help manage your healthcare decisions and financial matters while you focus on your well-being. She opened her portfolio and removed several official-looking documents. This is a durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances. It would grant Thomas and me the ability to make decisions on your behalf when necessary. I looked at the papers, then at my son. Is this what you want, Thomas? He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we're just trying to protect you. After what happened at the train station. What exactly do you think happened at the train station? I interrupted. Jessica jumped in smoothly. Viola, we're not here to upset you or rehash difficult experiences. We're focused on solutions for moving forward safely. I'd like to hear from Thomas, I insisted. What do you believe happened that day? Thomas sighed. Mom, you got confused and wandered off. Jessica searched for hours. It was terrifying for everyone. That's not what happened, I said calmly. But let's set that aside for now. These documents would give Jessica control over my finances and medical decisions. It would give us the ability to help you, Jessica corrected. To ensure bills are paid properly, investments are managed well, and you receive appropriate medical care. And what about my home? My assets, I asked. What happens to those under this arrangement? They would be managed for your benefit, Jessica replied smoothly. We would ensure everything is properly maintained. I nodded slowly, as if considering. And if I refuse to sign? Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Viola, this isn't about refusing. It's about accepting help when it's needed. If you're unable to recognize that need, she let the sentence hang ominously. What Jessica means, Thomas interjected, is that we're worried about your safety living alone. If you won't accept this help, we might need to consider assisted living options. The threat was clear. Sign over control or be placed in a facility. I see, I said quietly. This is a big decision. I'd like some time to think about it. Jessica looked like she wanted to object, but Thomas nodded. Of course, Mom. How much time do you need? A week, I replied. I'd like a week to review these documents and consider my options. Jessica's displeasure was evident, but with Thomas agreeing, she had little choice. 1 week, she conceded. But Viola, please understand the seriousness of your situation. After what happened at Harkin Station, we can't in good conscience leave things as they are. After they left, I contacted Marjorie immediately. They want me to sign power of attorney documents within a week, or they're threatening assisted living. They can't force you into assisted living without a court order, Marjorie assured me. But we need to move quickly. I'll review any documents they've left with you, but don't sign anything yet. Over the next few days, I put our plan into action. Marjorie reviewed the power of attorney papers, pointing out concerning clauses that would give Jessica nearly unlimited control over my assets. This is not a standard document, she warned. It's been modified to grant exceptionally broad powers. Eleanor helped me install small cameras in my living room and kitchen areas where I might meet with Jessica and Thomas. If she's going to manipulate you, let's get it on video, she said. I also reached out to Frank, the security guard from Harkin Station, who provided a written statement about finding me alone that night and his observations about my mental clarity. Most importantly, I contacted Thomas's childhood friend Michael, now a detective with the state police. We had always been close, and I'd maintained contact with him over the years, even after Thomas and Jessica's relationship limited my interaction with many longtime connections. I remember Jessica always gave me a strange vibe, Michael said after hearing my story. Too perfect, too controlled. And now this is criminal behavior, Viola. Michael agreed to help both as Thomas's friend and in his professional capacity. Financial elder abuse is a crime, he explained, and what she did at Harkin Station could constitute reckless endangerment. We take these cases very seriously. The week passed in a flurry of preparations. I met with Marjorie to finalize legal protections and gathered all the evidence we'd collected on Jessica's previous marriage and financial situation. Michael arranged to be present unofficially when Jessica returned for my answer about the power of attorney. The day arrived and I felt strangely calm. The fear that had been my constant companion for months had been replaced by determination. Jessica had underestimated me, assumed I was a helpless old woman who could be easily manipulated and discarded. She was about to learn otherwise. Jessica arrived alone at my cottage the following Saturday, power of attorney documents in hand. I'd anticipated this. Her manipulation worked better without witnesses, even Thomas. Thomas had an urgent work matter, she explained smoothly as I invited her in. But he sends his love and hopes you've had time to think about our discussion. I have, I replied deliberately, making my voice quaver slightly. Please sit down. Would you like some tea? Jessica seated herself at my kitchen table, arranging the documents before her. No tea, thank you. I think it's best we focus on these papers. Have you reviewed them? I tried, I said, affecting confusion. They're very complicated. All that legal language. A satisfied smile flickered across Jessica's face. That's why Thomas and I want to help you, Viola. These matters can be overwhelming for someone your age. I nodded meekly, playing directly into her perception of me as feeble and confused. I just want to make sure I understand. These papers would let you make decisions about my money. They would allow us to help manage your financial affairs, Jessica corrected, her tone patronizing, to ensure everything is properly handled. And my house, I asked, glancing around my cottage. What happens to it? Jessica leaned forward, speaking slowly, as if to a child. Your house would remain yours, of course. We would simply ensure it's properly maintained. Bills are paid, that sort of thing. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The documents would give her and Thomas joint ownership with right of survivorship, effectively transferring my property to them. I see, I murmured. And if I become worse, more confused? Jessica's eyes gleamed with triumph. She thought I was admitting to cognitive decline. Then we would ensure you receive appropriate care in a suitable facility. Your assets would be used to provide for your needs. That's very thoughtful, I said. But expensive, isn't it? Nursing homes, memory care units? Jessica waved a dismissive hand. Your savings and home equity would cover those costs. That's why proper financial management is so important now before any crisis occurs. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I suppose you're right. Thomas has always trusted you with money matters. He has, Jessica agreed, warming to her apparent victory. I've managed our investments very successfully. Even with the recent losses, I asked innocently. Jessica stiffened. What losses? Oh, I thought Thomas mentioned something about investment troubles, I said vaguely. My mistake. Jessica's expression darkened momentarily before she recovered her composure. There have been no losses. Our financial situation is excellent. That's good to hear, I said. I worry about Thomas working so hard. All those late nights business trips. He enjoys his work, Jessica replied curtly, clearly eager to return to the matter at hand. Now, about these documents. It just seems he's away more often lately. I continued, ignoring her attempt to refocus. Is everything all right between you two? Jessica's smile tightened. Everything is fine, Viola. You really shouldn't worry about things you don't understand. I suppose not, I agreed. It's just marriages can be complicated. My Robert and I had our challenges too over the years. Thomas and I have a perfect understanding, Jessica said coldly. Now, if we could return to the matter at hand. Of course, I said. These papers, they seem so final. Once I sign them, what happens to my independence? My ability to make my own choices? Jessica saw her opening and pounced. Viola, let's be honest. Your independence is already compromised by your condition. The Harkin Station incident proved that. You need supervision and support. You mean when you left me stranded at that deserted train station, I asked, my voice suddenly clear and firm. Jessica's eyes narrowed. That is not what happened. You wandered off confused. I searched for hours. No, Jessica. You deliberately abandoned me there to make me appear incompetent. Just like you've been moving my belongings, changing my medications, and lying to Thomas about my behavior for months. Jessica's face hardened, all pretense of warmth vanishing. No one will believe that, Viola. You're a confused old woman with documented cognitive issues. It's your word against mine. And why would you do such a thing, I asked, keeping my voice steady. Jessica leaned forward, her voice dropping. Let's just say I'm tired of waiting for my inheritance. Thomas has family money that he's too cautious to touch, and your little nest egg would solve several pressing problems. Why should I wait 20 years for you to finally die? So this is about money, I said. Not concern for my well-being. Jessica laughed coldly. Please. Do you think I enjoy playing the dutiful daughter-in-law, listening to your boring stories about teaching bratty children, coming to this pathetic little cottage and pretending to care? And Thomas, does he know about your plans? Thomas sees what I want him to see, Jessica replied with chilling confidence. He's so worried about you that he's not paying attention to anything else. By the time he figures it out, if ever it will be too late, your assets will be mine to manage as I see fit. That's quite a confession, I remarked calmly. Jessica smirked. Who would believe you? You can barely remember what day at Island. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket and removing the small recorder, I remember exactly what day at Island. The day you revealed your true intentions. Jessica's eyes widened as she realized what I was holding. You can't record me without consent. That's illegal. You're right, I agreed. Which is why this recording is just for me to confirm my own memories when you try to twist them. But there are other forms of evidence that are perfectly legal. On cue, the doorbell rang. Jessica jumped, startled by the interruption. Expecting someone, she asked, her voice tight with sudden suspicion. As a matter of fact, I am, I replied, rising to answer the door. Jessica glanced at the papers on the table, clearly considering whether to grab them and leave before facing whoever was at the door. but curiosity or perhaps confidence in her ability to manipulate the situation kept her seated. I opened the front door to reveal Thomas, his face grim with purpose. Behind him stood Detective Michael Davis, my son's childhood friend, and now a respected officer with the state police. Mom, Thomas said, embracing me briefly. You were right. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Jessica rose from her chair, her face a mask of confusion. Thomas, what are you doing here? I thought you had a meeting. I canceled it, Thomas replied coldly. After Detective Davis contacted me with some very disturbing information. Jessica turned her attention to Michael, her expression quickly shifting to one of concerned confusion. Detective, I don't understand what's happening. Michael stepped forward, professional and formal. Mrs. Winters. I'm Detective Michael Davis. I've been investigating allegations of elder abuse and attempted financial exploitation. Jessica laughed, the sound brittle and forced. That's ridiculous. I've been trying to help Viola. She's been experiencing cognitive decline. That's not what her medical records indicate, Michael replied evenly. I have statements from her physicians confirming she has only mild age, appropriate memory issues, nothing that would impair her judgment or ability to manage her affairs. Jessica's gaze darted between Thomas and Michael, calculating her next move. Thomas, surely you've seen your mother's confusion, the incident at Harkin Station. You mean when you abandoned her at a deserted train station and then lied about it? Thomas asked, his voice hard with anger. Yes, I've heard all about that from Frank Wilson, the security guard who found her. Jessica paled slightly but maintained her composure. She wandered off. I searched for hours. The security cameras in the parking lot show your car leaving at 1:15, Michael stated. A full 45 minutes before you told Mrs. Winters to meet you. You never entered the cafe area at all that day. Jessica's confident facade began to crack. This is absurd. Viola is clearly manipulating both of you. We also have evidence of your previous attempt to gain control of assets through a power of attorney with your first husband, Michael continued. Alan Whitaker has provided a detailed statement about your tactics, which mirror exactly what you've been doing to Mrs. Winters. At the mention of her ex-husband, Jessica's expression changed from confident dismissal to barely contained rage. Alan was mentally unstable. His statements would never be admissible. Perhaps not alone, Michael agreed. But combined with the financial investigation, revealing your substantial personal debt, the manipulated power of attorney documents you prepared for Mrs. Winters' witness statements and surveillance footage, it creates a compelling case. I stepped forward feeling stronger than I had in months. I'm not confused, Jessica. I never was. You tried to make me doubt my own mind, to isolate me from Thomas and everyone who cared about me. You thought I was an easy target, a helpless old woman. You were wrong. Jessica's mask finally shattered completely, her face contorting with fury. You stupid old bitch, you think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Her outburst hung in the air, shocking in its naked hatred. Thomas stared at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. That's enough, Michael said firmly. Mrs. Clayton, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted financial elder abuse, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As Michael continued reading Jessica her rights, the reality of what had just happened seemed to finally penetrate her anger. Her face went from rage to disbelief to calculation, and finally settled on a cold, empty stare. Thomas moved to stand beside me, his arm around my shoulders. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have believed you. I leaned against my son, watching as Michael handcuffed Jessica and led her from my cottage. The woman who had nearly destroyed my life and my relationship with my son looked small and ordinary without her mask of caring concern. As the door closed behind them, I turned to Thomas. We have a lot to talk about. He nodded, his eyes filled with regret and determination. We do. And this time I promise I'll listen. The weeks following Jessica's arrest were both painful and healing. Thomas moved temporarily into my guest room, partly to support me, and partly I suspected because he couldn't bear to be alone in the house he had shared with Jessica. I keep going over every moment, Every conversation he confessed one evening as we sat on my porch, trying to see when I should have noticed, when I should have believed you. She was very skilled at manipulation, I replied gently. She knew exactly how to play on your love and concern for me. That's no excuse, Thomas insisted. You're my mother. I should have trusted you. Jessica was charged with multiple counts of attempted elder abuse, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The evidence against her was substantial, from the security footage at Harkin Station to the manipulated power of attorney documents, witness statements, and financial records showing her desperate need for money. Her previous husband, Alan, came forward with his own story of manipulation and gaslighting, strengthening the case against her. She eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial, resulting in a 3-year prison sentence, followed by probation and mandatory psychological counseling. Thomas filed for divorce immediately, a process complicated by Jessica's attempts to claim portions of his family inheritance and our family home in Maine, which had been sold after Robert's death. The legal battles would continue for months, but Thomas seemed relieved to have the truth exposed regardless of the financial cost. I can earn more money, he told me. I can't get back the trust I almost lost with you. For my part, I began working with a therapist specializing in trauma and elder abuse. Dr. Ramirez helped me process not just the betrayal by Jessica, but the deeper pain of having been made to doubt my own mind. Gaslighting is particularly devastating because it attacks your fundamental sense of reality, she explained during one session. Recovering isn't just about acknowledging what happened, but rebuilding trust in your own perceptions. Through therapy, I connected with a support group for seniors who had experienced similar forms of abuse. Their stories resonated deeply with mine: wealthy widows whose children's spouses had isolated and manipulated them, retired professionals whose life savings had been targeted by caregivers or family members, elders whose cognitive abilities had been deliberately called into question to gain control of their assets. You're one of the lucky ones, said Harriet, a retired librarian whose nephew had emptied her accounts before being caught. You fought back and won. Many of us weren't so fortunate. Her words stayed with me, sparking a determination to help others in similar situations. With encouragement from Marjorie, the elder law attorney who had helped me, I began speaking at senior centers about recognizing the signs of manipulation and financial exploitation. Trust your instincts, I would tell my audiences. If something feels wrong, it probably isn't, and don't be afraid to seek help, even if the person causing harm is someone you love or who claims to love you. Thomas attended many of these talks, adding his perspective as someone who had unwittingly enabled abuse. His honesty about his own blindness often moved people to tears and helped other family members recognize how they might be missing signs of abuse within their own families. Our relationship grew stronger through this shared mission. Thomas cut back his work hours, prioritizing our weekly dinners and regular outings. We took a trip to Maine together, visiting old friends and our former family home, now owned by a young couple with 3 children. Dad would be happy to see children in the house again, Thomas remarked as we drove away. And proud of how you stood up for yourself. I continued living independently in my cottage, but with new safeguards in place. Thomas helped me install a security system with cameras. I kept a detailed journal of my activities and important conversations. Most importantly, I rebuilt my social connections, rejoining my book club and volunteering at the local elementary school, sharing my teaching experience with a new generation. Eleanor remained my closest friend, her practical nurse's perspective and unwavering support a constant comfort. You've got more grit than people half your age, she told me. Don't ever forget that. 6 months after Jessica's arrest, I received a letter from Frank, the security guard who had found me at Harkin Station. He was retiring and moving to Florida, but wanted to check how I was doing. In my 30 years working security, I've seen all kinds of people in trouble, he wrote. But I've rarely seen someone fight back with as much courage and dignity as you showed. You reminded me that we're never too old to stand up for ourselves. His words touched me deeply. From the darkest experience of my life had come unexpected strength and purpose. I had discovered resilience. I didn't know I possessed and forged connections with people who truly valued and respected me. 1 year to the day after the Harkin Station incident, Thomas and I returned there together. The station was busy with Sunday visitors, families exploring the exhibits, couples enjoying the cafe. "Are you sure you want to be here?" Thomas asked, as we stood on the platform where I had spent those frightening hours alone. "I'm sure," I replied. "This place is part of my story now, but it doesn't have power over me anymore." We had lunch in the same cafe where Jessica had failed to meet me, but this time filled with laughter and plans for the future. Thomas was dating again cautiously, a kindergarten teacher who reminded me a little of myself at that age. "I've learned to look for kindness first," he told me. "Everything else is secondary." As we drove home that afternoon, I reflected on the profound lesson this ordeal had taught me. Our minds and our memories are precious, forming the foundation of our identity and autonomy. When someone tries to make you doubt your own reality, they are attacking something fundamental to your humanity. But I had also learned that vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. Asking for help, admitting fear, recognizing when you're in danger, these aren't failures. They're acts of wisdom and self-preservation. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to reclaim your power and your voice. At 68, I had faced one of the greatest challenges of my life, and emerged stronger, more certain of myself, and more connected to others than ever before. As I look toward the future, I no longer fear aging or the inevitable changes it will bring. I know now that my worth isn't measured by my physical strength or perfect recall, but by the relationships I nurture, the wisdom I share, and the courage I show in facing life's challenges. To anyone who has felt manipulated, gaslighted, or made to doubt their own mind, I want to say this: trust yourself. Seek allies who believe you. Document what happens. And never, ever surrender your truth to someone else's convenient narrative. Our stories matter. Our memories, however, imperfect, matter. And most of all, our right to dignity and self-determination matters at every age and stage of life. Have you ever experienced someone trying to make you doubt your own reality? Or have you helped someone recognize manipulation in their life? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else recognize what's happening to them. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself and reclaim your truth.